Amen. All right. Turn to 2 Kings chapter 9. 2 Kings chapter 9. We are finally getting to what I would consider kind of a little bit of a bright spot in the northern kingdom's history. While they wouldn't have felt it was too bright during this time, at least some of the people, we're going to kind of start seeing some positive things happen, because for several weeks now, we have just been looking at bad from all the northern kingdoms of the northern kingdom. They have all been bad. We'll kind of go through the chronology of that when we get to the end of this. But what we're about to see is we're about to see the rise of Jehu, who is a very interesting character, and who is, in reality, I won't go as far as saying he was a good king. He was the closest thing they had to a good king. He definitely did some good stuff. He was kind of like Trump, where it's like one day you think Trump's great, another day you're like, this guy's horrible. And so it just depends. And that's kind of how Jehu was. You know, so you do one day you're cheering for him, the next day you're just, oh, what is wrong with this guy? And you know, hey, you can't take away from the positive things. You know, you're thankful for the good things. We have this attitude that if somebody does anything good, everything they must do is good. And if they do anything bad, everything they must do must be bad. You know, and then everybody's like, because a good tree can't bring forth corrupt fruit, and a corrupt tree can't bring evil fruit. And one of these days I'm going to straighten everybody out on that passage. Today's not going to be that day. But that's just a dumb mentality, okay? Sometimes good people do bad things, and sometimes bad people do good things. It is possible for a Mormon firefighter to save someone's life, and that was a good thing. And that dirty Mormon did, you know, we can commend him for it, and you can thank him for it. I ain't thanking a Mormon for nothing. I will if he pulls me out of a burning building. I will definitely thank him for that, and I think it's okay if I do that. You're bidding him Godspeed. I'm not encouraging him in his Mormonism, but I will encourage him in his bravery in fighting fires and saving lives. But he's sending souls to hell. That's so much. I get it, but you know what? I'm glad he took a break from sending souls to hell and saved me from burning to death. So again, I don't know. I've been around too many weirdos the last several years who just kind of have these mentalities, and I hope we always have a church of people who are capable of thinking rationally, because we don't want to have a church full of weirdos and nut jobs and just have that kind of mentality. But Jehu is a guy who it's a little confusing. And as we see him, and what's a mistake I think some people made, and I don't want to get ahead of myself because some of this we'll see in the next weeks, I personally think some of the things that we see him do, while some are awesome, some things are like, wait a minute, hang on a second. I don't know for sure if this was right or not. And because we see him doing good things, a lot of times we make him the hero, and it's like, no, this was good. It's like, no, I don't think that was good. I'm not really sure that's the way we should handle some of these things. But everybody's got this mentality. He's either good or he's bad. You know, and therefore, everything he's doing is good, and you know, we're justified to have this kind of behavior. No, not necessarily. So we'll talk about some of these things as we go through this, probably more in the next weeks. But before we get into this chapter, I do want us to go back to 1 Kings 19. Okay, let's go all the way back to 1 Kings 19. And remember, there's 22 chapters in 1 Kings. So this was several chapters ago. But understand, what we are about to finally see take place here in 2 Kings 9 was set in motion way back here in chapter 19, verse 13. It says, "It was so, when Elijah heard it, that he wrapped his face in his mantle." This is after the Elijah and the prophets of Baal contest. "And he went out and stood in the entering in of the cave, and behold, there came a voice unto him and said, What doest thou here, Elijah? And he said, I have been very jealous for the Lord God of hosts, because of the children of Israel have forsaken thy covenant, thrown down thine altars, slain thy prophets with the sword, and I, even I only, am left, and they seek my life to take it away." We remember this. Elijah is having a pity party. He's upset with God. He's like, Lord, why are you letting Israel get away with this? And ladies and gentlemen, Israel was not getting away with anything. God was well aware of everything that was going on, and God is about to set things in motion to deal with it. But God's timing is not our timing. Sometimes God's judgment takes a while. And so we have to be patient when that happens. And so again, it's a lot, but either way, God's always acting. God's always doing something. Whenever you see injustice being done, like we see all the time in our own country, don't ever get upset with God, because you can mark it down. He's going to deal with things. And the reality is, he probably has already set those things in motion. We just don't know what they are. We can't see these things. And it's not our job to see all these things. We don't have to know all these things. You know what we do need to do? We need to just trust God and just let him know this is his to take care of. Vengeance belongs to God. Say, well, I'm mad about Epstein and all the stuff that he got away with and all the people that were involved with it. I want vengeance. So do I. But you know what? It does belong to God. And God will repay. And I'm not saying our authorities shouldn't do anything. Absolutely they should. I think they ought to be the instruments that God uses. But even if they don't, and they probably won't because they're also stinking corrupt, just understand God will. And so, and the reality is, if we knew what was in motion, we would probably be praying for the Lord to take it easy, because we see examples of that in the Bible too. So I don't want to spend a lot of time on that. But notice it says in verse 15, and the Lord said unto him, Go, return on thy way to the wilderness of Damascus, and when thou comest, anoint Hazael to be king over Syria. And Jehu, the son of Nimshi, shalt thou anoint to be king over Israel, and Elisha, the son of Shaphat of Abel-Meholah, shalt thou anoint to be a prophet in thy room. And it shall come to pass that him that escapeth the sword of Hazael shall Jehu slay, and him that escapeth the sword of Jehu shall Elisha slay. Yet have I left me 7,000 in Israel, all the knees which have not bowed unto Baal, and every mouth which hath not kissed him. So right here, God's saying, hey, here's what I want you to do. Here's your next step, Elijah. I need you to go anoint some people, because I have seen everything you've seen and a whole lot more. And yes, I'm going to deal with Syria, and I'm going to deal with the king of Israel. And you know what? And I'm prepping everything too to even replace you. Not because he's in trouble. God's going to take care of Elijah. Elijah is going to get to go to heaven without dying, which is pretty cool. So everything's going to be great for Elijah. God saw the good that Elijah was doing. God saw the evil everybody else is doing. Elijah, though, is having a moment where he's not really trusting God like he should, and he's kind of having a bad attitude. But God, and him and God, they had a very close relationship. God was very good to him, and God let him know, hey, I do have a plan. I am dealing with this. Here's your next step. You go take care of this. But either way, it's still a long time later before we finally start seeing these things play out. But that's what we're about to start seeing in chapter 9. Jezebel is still alive, and she needs to go. And we're going to finally get to see her get what's coming to her. And you know what? Everybody in here who's upset about Hillary and all the things she's gotten away with over the years, take comfort from this chapter tonight. God takes care of Jezebel's. He takes care of Hillary's. They're going to get theirs one of these days. And so I find great comfort in this. So chapter 9, verse 1, and Elisha the prophet called one of the children of the prophets, and said unto him, Gird up thy loins, and take this box of oil in thine hand, and go to Ramoth Gilead. And when thou comest thither, look out there Jehu, the son of Jehoshaphat, the son of Nimshi, and go in and make him arise up from among his brethren, and carry him to an inner chamber. Then take the box of oil, and pour it on his head, and say, Thus saith the Lord, I have anointed thee king over Israel. Then open the door and flee, and tarry not. And I love looking at these stories and just seeing just kind of the unusual ways God would use the prophets to get a message out there. And so imagine what it would have been like if you're Jehu and a prophet shows up, anoints you to be king, and then as soon as he anoints you to be king and does this thing, he runs out like he's scared or something. He flees. And he'd be like, wait, what just happened? Okay, and I believe there's a message here. These are unusual instructions, but God would do these things. I think as a way too. It was one of the ways that he would speak. It was a way to get a point across. It was something that was memorable. And so verse 4, and the Bible does not tell us exactly why, God had the prophet do this. I think I'll give my opinion on it from what I think the prophet is saying by running out like that. But it says, So the young man, Even the young man, the prophet, went to Ramoth Gilead, and when he came, behold, the captains of the host were sitting, and he said, I have an errand to thee, O captain. And Jehu said, unto which of all us? And he said, to thee, O captain. And he arose and went into the house. So Jehu doesn't know what's about to happen. He doesn't know what's coming. He went into the house, and he poured the oil on his head, and said unto him, Thus saith the Lord God of Israel, I have anointed thee king over the people of the Lord, even over Israel, and thou shalt smite the house of Ahab thy master, that I may avenge the blood of my servants the prophets, and the blood of all the servants of the Lord at the hand of Jezebel. For the whole house of Ahab shall perish, and I will cut off from Ahab him that pisseth against the wall, and him that is shut up and left in Israel. And I will make the house of Ahab and the house of Jeroboam the son of Nebat, and like the house of Baasha the son of Ahijah. And the dog shall eat Jezebel in the portion of Jezreel, and there shall be none to bury her. And he opened the door and fled. So did exactly what God said. And again, I can't say for sure what this message is behind running away after anointing. I just love the picture. Because think about that. That would be kind of scary too. Because these guys knew you do what the prophets tell you to do. This was God's way of selecting kings. He would have the prophets anoint them. We saw that practice. So this is big when a prophet comes and anoints you to be king. But it also means too, hey, the other king's not going to appreciate this. You know, this means we've got a battle coming. And so the last thing you want to do is run from it, because now you're kind of going against God. But if you embrace it too, now you're going up against the king. And so before Jehu even has time to think about what's going on, before he even has time to ask any questions, this guy basically tells you, hey, God wants you to destroy Ahab and all his house. And before you can even ask any questions, boom, he just bolts out the door, takes off running. And if you're Jehu, it's just like, okay. But Jehu, again, being the unique character he was, he almost seems to me like he's all too anxious to embrace this. He's like, all right, let's go. Because, again, I think while this guy had some faults, I think he was a good guy, and he probably had a problem with Ahab in his house. If this is a good man at all, he's not going to appreciate somebody like Ahab. And understand, God is finally going to deal with this house of Ahab, and he's going to do exactly what he did with the house of Jeroboam. All of his line wiped out. The house of Baasha, all of his line wiped out. And remember, that was something that was a great judgment for these people. That was something they cared about greatly. This is foreign to us as Americans, okay? In America today, a great portion of our population does not care if they leave any kind of legacy. They do not care if they don't have any children, if their name doesn't go on. That is not a priority, and there's a lot of reasons for that. And again, a lot of that's because of the way our system works. We don't own anything. Don't get me going on that subject of why we don't care. This is by design, and it's one of the things that's destroying our nation. It's one of the things that's destroying our culture. We should be wanting to leave a legacy, and don't stop me from preaching on that right now, okay? I gotta stay focused here. But back then they had a different mentality. This is a great judgment. I am still old school in my thinking. I still care very much about that. And again, one of the reasons I felt a little more safe and I was a little more comforted taking Tommy over, to Israel, even though it didn't happen. That's where I'm supposed to be right now, crippling depression again. But anyway, it made me feel a lot better knowing that Jenna was carrying a Tommy the Fourth, because I want that name to go on. And it made me, and at the same time, I used to want to take Tommy and Jason over there at the same time, but then I was like, no, I can't take all of us there. I can't take the entire line. Too many lines of people have died out in Israel too. And I was like, I can't take them at the same time. So I was hoping to take Tommy this time, maybe in the future take Jason. I'm not taking them all there at once. And I would prefer to wait until he knows he's at least got a boy coming too, before, because again, I want his name to go on as well. That kind of thing's important to me. And people might think, well, you're weird because of that. It's like, no, I think I just exemplify humanity. You are an American. That's why you don't care. You are a 21st century American, probably Gen Z. and therefore you don't care about that stuff. We should care about those things. These things should be important. And I just say all that to say that this is great judgment that's coming on Ahab in a bigger way than you realize. And so, but this needs to happen. This guy, Ahab, had it coming for sure. And so you would think if you're Jehu, if you are Jehu, you're like, man, you know what? Every single king that went before me was wiped out in his entire line. I better obey God. And Jehu does better than some. But we're going to see, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but because Jehu does some good things God appreciated, God promised him 4 generations, which is more than any of the other northern kingdom kings had. God said, you're going to have 4 generations, but then after that, you're done. And then Jehu got, his line got the same thing everybody else did. But at least he got 4 out of that. But you would think he would have learned his lesson. But anyway, verse 11, then Jehu came forth to the servants of his Lord, and one said unto him, Is all well? Wherefore came this mad fellow to thee? And he said unto them, Ye know the man in his communication. So these other guys, they're like wondering, hey, what was going on? Who was this crazy man that came? Why did they think he was crazy? They obviously saw him go in there. I don't know if they saw him get anointed to be king, but they obviously saw him running out of there like a maniac. And again, so they thought the guy was crazy because it was. It looked a little crazy. And again, what I personally think, this is just my opinion, when I look at that, what was God trying to communicate when he has the prophet go in there, anoint him, give him instructions, and then run out? My interpretation of that action, and I could be wrong, is that God is basically saying, act quickly. That's kind of what I think he's doing. I think it was a way of communicating urgency. I think God wanted Jehu right away to act and do what the prophet told him to do. And we're going to see that's exactly what he does. And so it says that, and they said, it is false, tell us now. And he said, Thus and thus spake he to me, saying, Thus saith the Lord, I have anointed thee king over Israel. So Jehu confirmed that the man had told them the truth. That's what he said, that he was in fact the new king. And notice it says, Then they hasted and took every man his garment and put it under him on the top of the stairs and blew with the trumpets, saying, Jehu is king. So right away, people are announcing it. They're getting the word out. They're not hiding it right away. And I think that was the message that the prophet was trying to get out when he took off running like that. So Jehu, the son of Jehoshaphat, the son of Nimshi, conspired against Joram. Now Joram had kept Ramoth-Gilead, he and all Israel, because of Hazael, king of Syria. And so remember, this is Joram or Jehoram, the son of Ahab, not Jehoram, the son of Jehoshaphat, that was around during that same time. But notice it says, But King Joram was returned to be healed in Jezreel of the wounds which the Syrians had given him when he fought with Hazael, king of Syria. And Jehu said, If it be your minds, then let none go forth nor escape out of the city to go to tell it in Jezreel. So Jehu rode in a chariot and went to Jezreel, for Joram lay there, and Ahaziah, king of Judah, was come down to see Joram. So again, Jehu, one of the things that we're going to see that's very enjoyable about him is he's a very zealous guy. He's somebody who he goes all out on everything. And so he tells these guys, don't let anyone escape. He is going to wipe everybody out. That's what he was told to do by the prophet. He is going to take everybody out. And so he does. He goes there to where Joram's at, and Ahaziah happens to be hanging over there. Remember, Ahaziah, he is the son of Jehoram, the son of Jehoshaphat. He was somebody who was also a very wicked king. He is somebody who is also closely aligned with the northern kingdom, like Jehoshaphat. Jehoshaphat's the good king. He was one, there was much good in him, but Jehoshaphat was wrong in aligning himself with the northern kingdom. Jehoshaphat was under God's judgment for standing with Israel. Literally. He is in trouble for standing with Israel. You know why? Because you're not standing with and supporting a nation when you are enabling wicked leadership. There is nothing good about that. There is nothing loving about that. There is nothing supportive of that. That is only evil when you stand with evil leaders. And understand, if people love America, they should stand against evil leadership that we have. They should be against evil decisions. And we've got this new mentality that supporting a nation means always going along with the leadership, no matter who they are, no matter what they do. That's ridiculous. And understand, Jehoshaphat brought a curse on his house because of his support for Israel, support for Ahab, a wicked king, and it carried on. His son Jehoram also aligned himself with Ahab and with Jehoram. And Jehoram had Ahab's daughter for his wife. And Athaliah, who is very evil, and we'll see later the bad things that she does. But this just would have destroyed Judah. This would have destroyed the line of David had it not been for God's promise. Had God not miraculously preserved that seed, that would have happened just because of what Jehoshaphat did. That's how serious of a sin it was in him aligning with the wicked king. And it does. And when I see Jehoshaphat and Ahab standing by each other in the Bible, that doesn't give me warm, fuzzy feelings. That was bad. And you know what? It's the same feeling I get when I see our president standing with Benjamin Netanyahu. I think it's a terrible thing. And it's something that ought to scare us as a nation. And we need God's people calling these things out, because it's going to bring a curse on our nation. And so Jehu, though he's getting busy, he's getting everybody rounded up to do the thing God said. Jehoram and Ahaziah, they're together, which is not a good thing. And Ahaziah is about to die as a result of this close alignment with Joram. Jehu wasn't really going after him, but Ahaziah's in the wrong place right now. And it says, and there stood a watchman on the tower in Jezreel, and he spied the company of Jehu as he came, and said, I see a company. And Joram said, take an horseman, and send to meet them, and let him say, is it peace? So we're about to start seeing something too in this personality of Jehu and in the character of Jehu that is, I think, fascinating, and what makes Jehu a fascinating guy. And I think if you wanted to use one word to sum up Jehu, and one of the things he's known for is zeal. He was a very zealous individual. Now, something about zeal everybody needs to understand. Many people think that zeal is a positive character trait. Like if a person's zealous, that means they're good. Not necessarily. Okay, saying that somebody is good or saying zeal is a positive character trait, it would kind of be like saying that being passionate is always a positive thing. It's like, well, it depends on where you put that passion. Some people are very passionate about things we shouldn't be passionate about. Some people are very zealous about evil. Some people, and if you want to know a great example of somebody else who is very zealous in the Bible, and it was good and bad, how about Saul of Tarsus? Was Saul of Tarsus a zealous individual? Yeah, he was. He was so zealous in his zeal for, Judaism that he was persecuting Christians. But thankfully, God saved him, and then he turned that zeal towards the things of God, and then that zeal that he had was a very positive thing, and the Apostle Paul was one of the greatest Christians there ever was. Now, there's a lot of people out there, they are zealous, and they're kind of like Jehu, and they like using verses from Jehu, and sometimes in their zeal, they do some pretty good things. It's like, that's pretty cool, and then other times it's like, this is terrible. You're a maniac. So it's just like, hey, zeal is only good if it's channeled in the right direction and towards the right things. And you do. You have some people, their zeal is all bad. You have some, their zeal, they keep it towards all things that are good. You have some that are kind of a mix. And so again, zeal itself, that alone is not good. It's got to be towards the right things. The Jews, they had a zeal of God, but not according to knowledge. Therefore, it was bad for them. It ended up becoming a hindrance to their salvation. You know, you want to know another group of people that's very zealous? How about Islamic terrorists? That's zeal, ladies and gentlemen. When you'll strap a bomb to yourself and go blow yourself up, you are a very zealous individual. But are these good guys? No, they're very bad guys. But imagine if we can get some of these maniacs to get saved and to turn that zeal for God. You know, wouldn't that be an amazing thing? And thankfully, Jesus won't tell you to blow yourself up. He might let you get blown up somewhere else, you know, serving him. That's fine, you know. And if you're going to be a martyr, do it towards something that will actually benefit you, and rather than sending you to hell like what's going on with those guys. But he was definitely a very interesting character, and so many people who try to brag on their zeal often avoid admitting what they're actually zealous about. You know, and sometimes too, you know, their zeal is selective. You know, they will be very zealous about their hatred for reprobates, but when it comes for their love for others, no big deal. It's like, hey, how about you know, if you had an equal zeal with love as you do with hate, that would be interesting. You know, that would be good. But a lot of people miss that. And so when it comes to Jehu, everything we see though, it's with zeal. Sometimes it's awesome. Sometimes it's not good. Sometimes it's hard to tell. It's like, I really don't think we should handle things that way. But either way, look at verse 18. So there went out one on horseback to meet him and said, Thus saith the king, is it peace? And Jehu said, What hast thou to do with peace? Turn thee behind me. And the watchman told, saying, The messenger came to them, but he cometh not again. Okay, and typically when you send a messenger, you know, it's protocol too, you know, that even if you're the enemy, to give him the message and not hurt the messenger. But Jehu's like, no, we're not messing around. I don't want word getting out. We're going there. We're not going there to make any deals with anybody. We are going there to destroy. So he doesn't let the messenger come back. Then he sent out a second on horseback, which came to them and said, Thus saith the king, is it peace? And Jehu answered, What hast thou to do with peace? Turn thee behind me. And the watchman told, saying, He came even unto them, and cometh not again. Which, that's sending a message right there too. In reality, Jehu, you know, not letting these messengers go back is sending a message, we're coming to kill. You know, we mean business. And notice, and the driving is like the driving of Jehu, the son of Nimshi, for he driveth furiously. So again, right there, that is the personality of Jehu. Even when he's driving like a maniac, like he's angry. He's zealous in his driving. And again, right now, yeah, he's driving furiously. He's coming to kill. He's coming to destroy. But somehow they knew that was how he drove that way even when he wasn't doing that. Because like, hey, that's Jehu driving right there. He's driving like a maniac. And my dad always said he wanted to get Jehu on his license plate because, you know, my dad drove like a maniac. It's amazing my dad never got killed in a car wreck. You know, and my dad used to always say that, you know, if you ever want to learn how to be a better prayer warrior, come ride with me for a while. And he did. You know, it was a true thing. I got scared many times driving with my dad over the years. One time on the country roads not far from here, we used to go hunting over by Ohio. He was driving like 90 miles an hour down this country road. I remember looking at the speed limit, I was like, man, I think he's going almost 90. And all of a sudden, there's this cat right in the middle of the road. And I'm like, you know, it happens fast. I'm like trying to say cat, and he didn't even see it. And he just smokes this cat right in front of this house. And then like a week later, we're driving by that same house, and they've got a bunch of geese out there. And there's one right in the middle of the road. I'm like, and then smokes one of their geese. It's like, they're gonna wonder who's killing all their animals. And it was Dad. You know, he would just he's still alive. He never hurt anybody. He hurt some animals, but he never hurt any people driving. He used to always say too that when he gets to heaven, there's probably a nursing home there with a bunch of angels, you know, a nursing home for angels that he put in the nursing home because of all the work they had to do protecting him. But it definitely true. One time we were driving on 251, and they were doing construction. They had those big orange barrels there, and all of a sudden he's heading straight for a barrel. I never could talk when it was about to happen, and then just boom, smoked the barrel, knocked into the ditch. Just, you know, He's probably listening tonight too, and he's hearing me tell all these stories about him. But it was amazing. Another time, y'all are liking these stories. I'm just going to tell stories and quit preaching. But I remember we went golfing one time, and we're driving along, and a truck pulled out in front of him. This time it was somebody else's fault. And he like swerves to miss this truck, goes down into a ditch, right? And we were going pretty fast. You were always going fast when you were dad. We go down into a ditch, and then we're like heading for this part where it sticks up. We were going to hit it, and just like at the last second, he like turns it back up, and we fly back up on the road, and everything was fine. I mean, we rode through that ditch, didn't hurt anything, didn't hurt the car. I didn't get hurt. I mean, it was just amazing. My dad had a lot of guardian angels around him, but thankfully, I never really wanted him to get Jehu on his license plate because I thought that would encourage him to keep driving like a maniac. But anyway, whenever I read this verse, I think about him because he always wanted that, and he was worthy. If I did that, that would be just me trying to look like I'm a crazy driver, but ask my family, I drive like a grandpa, they tell me at least. So I definitely can't do that. But anyway, but that was just this guy's personality. This guy was a maniac. And sometimes that was a good thing. And that was his personality. It was who he was. And Joram said, make ready. And his chariot was made ready. And Joram, king of Israel, and Ahaziah, king of Judah, went out, each in his chariot. And they went out against Jehu and met him in the portion of Naboth the Jezreelite. And this is a fitting place for a showdown with the house of Ahab when you think about the fact that Naboth died over that Ahab had him murdered with the help of his wife Jezebel. She's the one that kind of facilitated everything. Again, Hillary, Jezebel, it's hard to tell the difference between these two. But this is a good place for them to die. This is a good place for a showdown. God remembered what happened to Naboth. And it says, and it came to pass when Joram saw Jehu that he said, is it peace, Jehu? And he answered, what peace, so long as the whoredoms of thy mother Jezebel and her witchcrafts are so many. And I love that because Jehu basically responded with a yo mama statement. He was just like, why would there be peace with a mom like you've got, with her whoredoms and her witchcrafts? But again, it was 100% true what he was saying about his mom. She was that evil. Jehu, in his zeal, insults his mama. And Joram turned his hands and fled and said to Ahaziah, there is treachery, O Ahaziah. And Jehu drew a bow, look at this, with his full strength. He's not content to just shoot him and kill him. He's like, no, I'm putting this arrow all the way through. That's how Jehu was. He was a maniac, and he drew it with full strength and smote Jehoram between his arms, and the arrow went out at his heart, and he sunk down in his chariot. And that's a great mental picture, too. I mean, he shot him in the back. He didn't care. This guy's going to die, and he did it at full strength, and next thing you know, he's got an arrow sticking out of his heart. Say, this is bloody. I don't like this. I do. This was evil, what these guys did. They had this coming. This was God's judgment on them. And so Jehu did. He drove like a maniac, and he wasn't content to just shoot the guy. No, he's going to put that arrow all the way through him if he can. And Jehu is just not a guy you wanted coming after you. He was not somebody you want coming after you. And it says, then said Jehu to Bidkar, his captain, take up and cast him in the portion of the field of Naboth the Jezreelite. For remember how that when I and thou rode together after Ahab his father, the Lord laid this burden upon him. Surely I have seen yesterday the blood of Naboth and the blood of his sons, saith the Lord. I will requite thee in this plat, saith the Lord. Now therefore take and cast him into the plat of ground according to the word of the Lord. So justice has finally come for Naboth. And it goes to show too that when it came to what happened to Naboth, there were people who knew that it was a setup. There were people who knew that it was a lie. So even though Jezebel got these false witnesses, there were people within the kingdom that knew, hey, something's wrong here. Naboth did not do this. Naboth's a good guy. They knew the authorities were lying about him. And just like there are people today, we know what's going on with the Epsteins and the Hillarys and all these people, the corruption, the Bushes, and I mean everybody, they're all so dirty and corrupt. There's all these things we all know about that we're all familiar with, but yet nobody seems to be doing anything about it. But again, God knows about these things. God sees all these things that are going on, and eventually these people are going to get what's coming to them. And this chapter is a great reminder of that. So this was a great testimony for all the people who knew what happened. And they were able to see this. This was something that would cause them to fear God. And hopefully, too, help them to trust God in the future. When they see injustice done, they will remember what happened to the house of Ahab. They will remember what happened because of what was done to Naboth. That God does care about the just and the righteous and the innocent. And when they're treated wrong, this angers God greatly. And just understand, too, when people are wronged, a lot of times we have this attitude that, again, just let God deal with it. And I get it. Sometimes we have, in certain areas we have to. But if it is something where God has ordained government to deal with it, then you know what? The government should deal with it. And if they don't, God's mad at that government. If there is some kind of injustice that takes place in a church, God expects the church to deal with it. God has ordained the church to deal with it. And if the church just has that, well, God would deal with it. No, God's going to be mad at the whole church for not doing it. And it's a shameful thing when you see the innocent, when you see the weak, when you see a child. Again, if injustice is done, especially too, it's sad when you hear stories about a pastor doing something to a child and violating somebody in church. Listen, that child should be seen as equal value as the pastor and anyone in the church. And if a pastor does them wrong, and as a church you all do nothing, God's mad at all of you. And you all can try to have this attitude, well, we're just going to let God deal with it. No, God told you to deal with it. And you need to think about that person who was violated, that was innocent. Otherwise, God's mad at all of you, because God cares very much about things like that. And so you don't want to get in trouble with me in that situation. Never forget that. So I love these stories. They're comforting to me. And this is always the case when leaders do evil. And thankfully there's those out there who call out the evil and don't just go along. And there were people that knew that Naboth was innocent. But when Ahaziah, the king of Judah, saw this, he fled by the way of the garden house, and Jehu followed after him and said, smite him also in the chariot. And they did so at the going up to Gur, which is by Ibleam, and he fled to Megiddo and died there. And his servants carried him in a chariot to Jerusalem and buried him in his sepulchre with his fathers in the city of David. And in the 11th year of Joram, the son of Ahab, began Ahaziah to reign over Judah. And so Ahaziah basically dies like a rat, and he also deserved it too. Because of the things that he had done, this alliance that he had, it cost him his life. So verse 30, and when Jehu was come to Jezreel, Jezebel heard of it, and she painted her face and tired her head and looked out at a window. Now, it's hard to say for sure what she was doing, but from what if you look up the definition of those words, it's not in the Bible very much. It looks like she's trying to pretty herself up. Now, I don't know for sure, but when you hear about her whoredoms and things like that, I don't know if she's doing that hoping she's going to seduce Jehu. Maybe that's what she was going to, she was thinking during that time. I don't know. But either way, it didn't work. Jehu was on a mission. Jehu's doing exactly what the prophet told him to do, and he's doing it quickly. I mean, he's going all out. And as Jehu entered in at the gate, she said, had Zimri peace, who slew his master? And he lifted up his face to the window and said, who is on my side? Who? And there looked out to him 2 or 3 eunuchs. And he said, throw her down. So they threw her down, and some of her blood was sprinkled on the wall and on the horses, and he trode her underfoot. So again, she was up high enough in that tower that there was a little bit of a splat when she landed. That's not enough for Jehu. Then he runs her over. Okay? And again, so I don't think you should find pleasure in this. I'm sorry. I find pleasure in this. I think this is a great story. This was a fitting end for Jezebel. And typically, if you're going to execute royalty, you would do it in a little more dignified way. But this is Jehu. Now, this is my opinion, but I think one of the reasons, too, he acted so quickly and so roughly, I think he was tired and hungry. That's my opinion, and I'll show you why here. And notice it says in verse 34, and when he was come in, he did eat and drink, and said, go see now this cursed woman and bury her, for she is a king's daughter. So after he gets some food in his stomach and he's feeling a little better, it's like, we probably shouldn't just let her rot out there. This is a king's daughter. Let's go give her a burial, at least out of respect. So now he's a little more diplomatic after he's got some food in his belly. All right, remember that, ladies, when your husband's in a bad mood. All right, maybe he just needs something to eat. Okay, that'll help a lot of your marriage problems right there. Just feed him something good, and then you say he's acting like Jehu today in a bad way. Well, feed him, and then he'll act like good Jehu. So anyway, it says, and they went to bury her, but they found no more of her than the skull and the feet and the palms of her hands. Wherefore they came again and told him, and he said, this is the word of the Lord which he spake by his servant Elijah the Tishbite, saying, in the portion of Jezreel shall dogs eat the flesh of Jezebel. So again, people knew about the prophecies of Elijah. And he said, this is it. This is what was prophesied. And the carcass of Jezebel shall be as dung upon the face of the field in the portion of Jezreel, so that they shall not say, this is Jezebel. And isn't it, and I'm probably reading this wrong. It's worded in kind of an interesting way there, but when it says, the carcass of Jezebel shall be as dung upon the face of the field in the portion of Jezreel, which is literally what happens if a dog eats her. She's going to turn into dung. And then it says, so that they shall not say, this is Jezebel. I don't know if that's saying when they see the dung, they won't say this is Jezebel, or now whenever they see dung in Jezebel, they're like, that's Jezebel. I like that interpretation of it. That's probably wrong. But when I was reading that, I thought the wording of that's a little bit interesting. But I was just like, that would be, a fitting thing for Jezebel, that just whenever you're in Jezreel and you see dog poop anywhere, it's like, that's probably Jezebel right there. Because that's how you ought to think about a woman like that. I'm pretty sure that's an improper interpretation, but I still like it. Okay, and I'm a Baptist, so we're going to go with it. No, I'm just kidding. That's just kind of, these are the thoughts going through my head. But either way, that's what she was going to be. That was her end, because the Lord hated the things that she did. He hated her witchcraft. He hated her whoredoms and the things she did. And it wasn't just her doing these things. She was getting the kingdom to do these things. Jezebel was not someone who was just doing her own evil in her own personal life. No, she led others to evil and wickedness, and she provoked Ahab to do greater evil. So this was somebody that God is going to deal with, and he's going to deal with in a way that's going to send a message. And we should never look at someone like Jezebel and have any kind of respect. Again, I've never met anybody who named their daughter Jezebel. That would be a terrible thing to name your daughter, because she is probably the most wicked woman that we see in all the scriptures. And so even in Revelation, people debate, was that woman actually named Jezebel? Or are they just calling her that because of the evil that she was doing? And, that I would think that would be more likely. I kind of doubt maybe there was. But it's just hard to imagine there'd be two women that wicked with that same name. But at the same time, too, if you name your daughter after somebody who's horrible, you know what? She might look up to that person and become like that person, too. So watch out for that. Next, if you name your daughter Hillary, who knows? She might turn out to be, a Hillary. So just watch out for that kind of thing. But either way, the word of God came to pass again. And God could not have given more evidence to Israel of the importance of following him and obeying his law. This is what God has been trying to get out of Israel. This is what he's been trying to get out of the kings. Obey my law. Do the things I commanded to you. Submit to me. And you'd think at this point, if you're the king of Israel, you should be fearing God more than anyone else. Because what families are getting wiped out? It's the king's family that are getting wiped out for disobeying God. And so I just want to briefly do this review of the kings of Israel. Just kind of put some things in perspective. So the first one you had was Jeroboam. Jeroboam was told, if you will be like David, I will give you the same promise that I gave David, and you will always have a man on the throne. But Jeroboam immediately forsook God and ruined that. And so you had Jeroboam and then Nadab. That was it in his line. And then Jeroboam's line, gone. So we've got the family of Jeroboam. We have the family of Baasha. Baasha, the same thing. You had his son Elah, who became king. That family completely wiped out. Then you had Zimri. Zimri was king for a very short time. And then Zimri wiped out his family, completely gone. He didn't even have a second generation on the throne. So there's been 3 families. And then you had Omri. Omri was the 4th family. And with Omri, also an evil king. It was also pronounced judgment was going to come in his family because of his evil. But then you had Ahab and you had Joram. Omri, his line has lasted the longest. He got 3 generations. And in a way, his kind of overlapped into the southern kingdom. And then you had Athaliah, who was over the southern kingdom for a while. So Omri and his family and the impact they had lasted a long time. But we have finally now seen the 4th family. 4 families completely gone. Nothing left, which was a great judgment. And so if you're Jehu and you are like every other man in that day, you're like every other king in that day, you want your kingdom not just to last in your lifetime. This is not an American, ladies and gentlemen. This is a man, a regular man. This is a man's man. He wants his line to last too. So you would think he would have such a fear of God and would have just turned that zeal into total obedience and reformed that kingdom. And he did do some good things, but we're going to see he's not going to go far enough. And so Jehu is the 9th king of the northern kingdom, and this is the 5th family to take the kingdom. The other 4 families, all gone with nothing left. And we're going to find out he's going to mess up, but he's going to get 4 generations. He's going to get 4 generations. But Jehu is the closest thing that Israel, the northern kingdom, has had to having a good king. And we are just continually being reminded. And one other kind of side note that we're seeing as we go through these stories. Again, when we get to the captivity of the northern kingdom by the Assyrian Empire, while the Bible often, it just kind of, in these historical books, it really just kind of gives summaries of what took place. If you go to some of the prophets, that's where you can get kind of a more accurate idea of what it was like. But the problem is when we read the prophets, when you're in those minor prophets reading about the destruction that was going to come for the northern kingdom, it's pretty dramatic. The thing is, we don't see the fulfillment there. The fulfillment is just kind of given in a summary over in these other chapters. So we don't realize how bad it was. What happened to the northern kingdom and eventually later the southern kingdom was truly horrific. Where if you and I lived during that time, especially with our American mentality, our American Christian mentality, we would be like, why is all this happening? That's how we would be. Folks, this is why it's happening. God gave them warning after warning after warning, chance after chance after chance, chastening, and they just kept rebelling. And then finally God just said, enough's enough. And that's why, too, when we read the book of Revelation and we see the judgment that's going to come on this world one of these days, again, we're going to be like, a lot of people are going to be like, what's going on? Every day, if we actually paid attention to our Bibles like we should, every day that we are not having fire and brimstone rained on us, we would be like, the Lord sure is merciful. The Lord sure is gracious. It's amazing that it's only 97 degrees out right now when it should be, 1,000 degrees out. We should be getting torched right now, but God is being merciful and long-suffering to us. You know why? Because He's given the world a chance, because He wants more people to get saved. So in the meantime, all we can do is just concentrate on trying to promote as much righteousness as we can and get as many people saved. as we can. And so with that, let's pray. Dear Lord, thank you so much for this chapter and this great example of justice and long-awaited justice being done. I pray that it will be a message of comfort to all of us who are vexed and grieved by the evil that we see going on in our world today and amongst our leaders. Just help us to remember, Lord, that you are paying more attention to these things than we are, and I pray that we'll let you do your thing when it comes to this, and we'll just trust you, knowing that you always do what you say you're going to do. In your name we pray. Amen.